One night, a man was driving down a deserted road when his car suddenly sputtered and died. He pulled over to the side of the road, surrounded by total darkness. Frustrated, he popped the hood and grabbed his flashlight, trying to figure out what went wrong. After a few minutes of checking, he couldn't make heads or tails of it. He was starting to panic when, out of nowhere, a deep voice boomed from across the road. "It's your spark plug wire!" The man jumped, heart racing. "Who said that?" "I am what?" He called out, shining the flashlight toward the sound. To his disbelief, he saw a huge black horse standing on the other side of the road. The horse repeated, "It's your spark plug wire. It's disconnected." Still in shock, the man looked at his car, and sure enough, the spark plug wire was hanging loose. He quickly reattached it, hopped back in the car, and started the engine. To his relief, it roared to life. Shaken, he sped off to the nearest town. Once there, he walked straight into the local bar and asked for a double shot of whiskey. He slammed it down in one go, still trembling. A rancher sitting nearby noticed his pale face and asked, "What's wrong, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." The man took a deep breath and replied, "You're not going to believe it. A talking black horse just fixed my car." The rancher looked stunned for a moment, then nodded seriously. "I believe you. As a matter of fact, you're lucky." The man, still shaking, asked, "Why? Why am I lucky?" The rancher took another slow sip of his beer and said, "Because that horse is an accountant. He doesn't know anything about cars." Two guys stumbled out of the bar after a long night of drinking. They hopped into the car and started driving down a lonely road. After a few minutes, they suddenly noticed an old man appear at the passenger window, tapping lightly. The passenger screamed, "Look, there's an old ghost's face on the window." The driver floored the gas pedal, but the old man's face stayed there, pressing against the glass. Terrified, the passenger rolled his window down a crack and shakily asked, "What do you want?" The old man softly replied, "Got any tobacco?" The passenger, half in shock, handed him a cigarette, quickly rolling the window up and yelling to the driver, "Step on it!" A few minutes later, after their nerves had calmed, they started laughing at themselves. The driver said, "I don't know what happened, but don't worry, we're doing 80 now." Suddenly, there came that same light tapping on the window. "Oh no, there he is again!" the passenger yelled. Terrified, he rolled the window down again and stammered, "Yes." The old man asked quietly, "You got a light?" The passenger panicked, threw the lighter out the window, shouting, "Step on it!" The driver pushed the car to 100 miles an hour, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. Just as they thought they were safe, another tapping echoed on the window. "Oh my God, he's back!" the passenger cried. He quickly rolled down the window and screamed, "What now?" The old man, as calm as ever, simply said, "You want some help getting out of the mud?" Two guys were waiting at a busy train station, bored out of their minds. The first guy, looking for some fun, spots a bald man sitting alone across the platform. He turns to his friend and says, "I'll give you $20 if you go slap that guy on the back of his head." The second guy laughs and accepts the challenge. He sneaks up behind the bald man and gives his shiny head a good smack. "Hey, James, what are you doing here?" he says. The bald man, confused and a little angry, spins around and snaps, "Do I know you?" The second guy quickly apologizes, saying he mistook him for his friend James, and heads back to collect his $20. "Wow, I can't believe that worked," the first guy says, clearly impressed. "All right, I'll give you $50 if you do it again." His friend grins, accepting the new challenge. He goes over to the bald guy again, smacks the back of his head, and yells, "James, you're messing with me. We met at Chuck's bachelor party, remember? We had a great time." The bald man, now absolutely furious, stands up and shouts, "My name is not James. I don't know you." He grabs his things and storms off, moving to a completely different part of the station. The second guy returns grinning and collects his $50 from his friend. "That was amazing," the first guy says. "I'll give you $100 if you do it one more time." The second guy hesitates for a moment, thinking, but then decides to go for it. He sneaks up behind the bald man once more, smacks the back of his head, and yells, "James, what are you doing sitting over here? I've been bothering this other guy who looks just like you. How are you, man?" The bald man, now completely speechless, just stares at him in disbelief, unable to say a word. A Catholic priest and a rabbi were having a conversation one day when it turned to job descriptions and promotions. "What do you have to look forward to in terms of a promotion in your job?" asked the rabbi. "Well," said the priest, "I'm next in line for the Monsignor's position." Yes, and then what? Asked the rabbi. Next, I could become a bishop, replied the priest. And then? The rabbi pressed. If I do a good job as bishop, I could be promoted to archbishop, said the priest. Okay, and then? The rabbi asked, continuing his line of questioning. The priest, starting to feel a bit exasperated, said, Well, with a bit of luck and hard work, maybe I could become a cardinal. And then? Asked the rabbi again. Now the priest is starting to get frustrated. If everything falls into place, and I'm in the right spot at the right time, and I play my political cards just right, I might just get elected pope. The rabbi raised an eyebrow and asked one final time, And then? The priest, now thoroughly irritated, snapped, Good grief! What do you want me to become, God? The rabbi paused for a moment and replied, Well, one of our boys made it. A 55-year-old lady recently started learning to swim, which was quite a shift from her usual routine of going to the temple. Curious, everyone asked her, Why the sudden interest in swimming? With a look of helplessness, she replied, Whenever my son and daughter-in-law argue, she always asks him, If your mom and I fall into the water, whom will you save first? I didn't want to put my son in such a difficult position, she added. So I decided to learn to swim. A few days later, the husband and wife were quarreling again. The daughter-in-law asked, Now tell me, if your mom and I fall into the water, whom will you save first? The husband thought for a moment and replied, I don't need to get into the water. My mom knows how to swim, and she'll save you. But the wife pressed on, No, you have to jump into the water. You have to choose whom to save. Who will it be? The husband smiled and said, Then you'll surely die, because I don't know how to swim, and my mom will definitely save me first. At 75 years old, Bert had always wanted a pair of soft, spike golf shoes like Freddie Couples. So when he saw them on sale after his round of golf, he couldn't resist. He bought them and, excited to show them off, decided to wear them home. Walking proudly into the house, Bert sauntered into the kitchen and asked his wife, Notice anything different about me? Margaret, at 73, looked him over and replied, Nope. Frustrated, Bert stormed off to the bathroom, stripped off his clothes, and walked back into the kitchen completely naked, except for his new golf shoes. He asked again, a little louder this time, Notice anything different now? Margaret glanced up deadpan and said, Bert, what's different? It was hanging down yesterday, it's hanging down today, and it'll be hanging down tomorrow. Furious, Bert shouted, And do you know why it's hanging down, Margaret? Margaret, without missing a beat, replied, Nope, not a clue. Bert yelled, It's hanging down because it's looking at my new golf shoes. Margaret quickly responded, Should have bought a new golf hat, Bert. A young girl, writing a paper for school, approached her father and asked, Dad, what's the difference between anger and exasperation? The father smiled and said, It's mostly a matter of degree. Let me show you what I mean. With that, the father went to the telephone, dialed a random number, and said to the man who answered, Hello, is Melvin there? The man replied, There's no one living here, named Melvin. Why don't you learn to look up numbers before you dial? The father turned to his daughter and said, See, that man wasn't very happy with our call. He was probably busy with something and we annoyed him. Now, watch this. The father dialed the number again and asked, Hello, is Melvin there? Now look here, came the heated reply. You just called this number and I told you there's no Melvin here. You've got a lot of guts calling again. The receiver slammed down hard. The father turned to his daughter and said, That was anger. Now, let me show you exasperation. He dialed the same number once more, and when a furious voice roared, Hello? The father calmly replied, Hello, this is Melvin. Have there been any calls for me? At a busy city bus stop, a stunning young woman was waiting patiently, dressed head to toe in a tight leather outfit, miniskirt jacket, and knee-high boots. She was the picture of confidence. Until the bus pulled up. As she stepped forwards to board, she realized something awkward. Her skirt was so tight she couldn't lift her leg high enough to reach the first step. With a sheepish smile to the driver, she discreetly reached behind and unzipped her skirt a little, hoping that would do the trick. Nope. Still couldn't manage it. And so, trying to keep her cool, she unzipped it a bit more and tried again. Still no luck. Now visibly flustered but determined, she gave it one more tug, unzip, and braced for another try. Suddenly, a big Texan behind her calmly reached out, lifted her by the waist, and gently placed her on the bus step. The woman whirled around, furious. "How dare you touch me? I don't even know you." The Texan tipped his hat and said, "Well, ma'am, under normal circumstances, I'd agree. But after you unzipped my fly 3 times, I figured we were acquainted." Man arrested for laughing on a bus. His courtroom explanation had everyone in stitches. An 8 months pregnant woman got on a crowded city bus and sat down. Across from her, a young man noticed her condition and started smiling. She shifted uncomfortably and moved to another seat, but the man's smile only grew wider. Annoyed, she moved again. This time, he broke into a full grin. By her fourth move, now clearly irritated and feeling mocked, the man burst out laughing. That was it. She complained to the driver, and the man was arrested for causing a public disturbance. In court, the judge asked the young man, about 20 years old, to explain himself. He stood up and said, "Well, Your Honor, it wasn't what she thought. The first time she sat down, it was right under a sign that said, 'The Doublemint twins are coming.' And I couldn't help but grin. When she moved, she sat beneath another sign that read, 'Logan's liniment will reduce the swelling.' I had to smile. Then she moved again and sat under a deodorant ad. William's Big Stick did the trick. I nearly lost it, but, Your Honor, when she moved a fourth time and sat beneath a sign that said, 'Goodyear rubber could have prevented this accident,' I just couldn't hold it in anymore." The judge paused, then burst out laughing himself. "Case dismissed," he declared. The Lone Ranger was ambushed by a hostile native war party and taken to their camp. The chief, a proud and fierce leader, stood before him and said, "So, you're the great Lone Ranger. In honor of the Harvest Festival, I've decided you shall be executed in 3 days. But before that, I will grant you 3 requests." "What is your first request?" The Lone Ranger said. "I'd like to speak to my horse, Silver." The chief agreed, and Silver was brought before him. The Lone Ranger leaned in, whispered something into the horse's ear, and Silver galloped off into the distance. That evening, Silver returned with a gorgeous blonde woman riding on his back. She entered the Lone Ranger's tent and stayed the night. The next morning, the chief raised an eyebrow. "Impressive. Very loyal horse. But I'm still going to kill you in 2 days. What is your second request?" Once again, the Lone Ranger asked to speak to his horse. Silver was brought forward, and again the Lone Ranger whispered something into his ear. Silver galloped away. That night the horse returned, this time with an even more stunning brunette. She also entered the tent and stayed the night. By morning, the chief was thoroughly amazed. "Your horse is truly remarkable, but you die tomorrow. Now, what is your final request?" The Lone Ranger sighed and said, "I need to speak to my horse. Alone?" The chief, now very curious, agreed. Once alone, the Lone Ranger grabbed Silver by the ears, stared him dead in the eyes, and hissed, "Silver, for the last time, I said, bring posse!" A sweet old couple in their 80s were starting to have trouble remembering things, so they went to the doctor for a checkup. After running a few tests, the doctor said, "You're both in good health physically, but you might want to start writing things down to help with memory." That evening, while watching TV together, the husband got up from his chair. "Where are you going?" his wife asked. "To the kitchen to get a drink," he replied. "Will you bring me a piece of cake?" she asked. "Sure," he said. She added, "Better write it down." "I can remember a piece of cake," he grumbled. "Well, put some strawberries on it, please. And you really should write it down." "I got it," he insisted. "Cake, strawberries." She leaned in. "And whipped cream on top." Now clearly annoyed, he snapped, "Woman, I don't need to write it down. Cake, strawberries, whipped cream. I got it." He shuffled off into the kitchen. About 30 minutes later, he returned and proudly handed her a plate of bacon and eggs. She stared at the plate, looked up at him, and said, "Where's my toast?" In the heart of Cairo, there was a massive hole, a leftover from an abandoned construction project. Every day, unsuspecting people would fall in, many of them seriously injured. By the time an ambulance arrived and rushed them to the hospital, it was often too late. Alarmed by the ongoing tragedy, top government officials gathered for an emergency meeting. "What shall we do about this hole that's harming our citizens?" one minister asked solemnly. Silence fell over the room until one man confidently raised his hand. The solution is simple, he said. We station an ambulance right next to the hole. That way we can respond immediately. Applause filled the room. The next day, the plan was put in motion. But even with the ambulance on site, traffic delays still meant most victims didn't make it in time. So another meeting was called. We need to do more, one official said. A second man spoke up. If getting people to the hospital is too slow, let's build a hospital next to the hole. The room erupted in cheers, until the head of urban planning cleared his throat. Unfortunately, there isn't enough space for a hospital near the hole, he said. We're back to square one. A hush fell again. Then, from the back of the room, a quiet voice rang out, with bold certainty. I have it. We bring in a truck and fill in the hole. Everyone turned, stunned. And then, he continued, smiling proudly, we dig another hole next to the hospital. A man and his wife were sitting down to dinner when she said, Ringling Brothers is in town this week. The poster says they have a dancing bear. I've always wanted to see that. Maybe next year, the man replied. Work's a bit crazy right now. The next evening, as soon as he sat down, she lit up again. The neighbors went today, said the tightrope walkers did the hokey pokey on the wire. Can you believe that? I wish I could take you, he said. But if I don't finish this project, the boss will have my head. The next night, she beamed. The paperboy said a dozen clowns popped out of a teeny car and did the can-can in bloomers. He said it was the funniest thing he's ever seen. The man chuckled but sighed. Soon, I promise. Just not this week. The night after that, her mood had dropped. My book club saw the show. The lion tamer and the elephant rider did a waltz. They said it was magical. Everyone in town's seen it but us. Seeing her disappointment, the man gave in. You know what? Let's go tomorrow. I'll ask my buddy to cover for me at work. The next morning, the man and his wife set off hand in hand for the circus. At the office, the boss noticed he was missing and asked his coworker, Where's your friend today? The coworker shrugged and said, Oh, he couldn't make it in. He's out due to 4 unseen circus dances. For several years, a man had been secretly having an affair with an Italian woman. One evening, she tearfully confessed, I'm pregnant. Panic set in. He couldn't risk ruining his reputation or his marriage. So he offered her a generous sum of money to return to Italy, have the baby in secret, and raise the child there. I'll also send monthly support, he promised, until the child turns 18. She agreed. But how will I let you know when the baby is born, she asked. He thought for a moment, then said, Just send me a postcard. Write spaghetti on the back, that's all. I'll handle the rest. Months went by. Then one day, he came home to find his wife holding a postcard, looking puzzled. Sweetheart, she said slowly, you got a very strange letter today. Oh, he asked, trying to sound casual. Let me see. She handed it over. He read it, turned pale, and promptly collapsed. The postcard simply read, Spaghetti, spaghetti, spaghetti. 2 with meatballs, 1 without. Send extra sauce. A politician is visiting the local mental asylum and asks, How do you decide whether someone should be admitted here? Well, says the director, we fill up a bath with water and then give the patient a teaspoon, a mug, and a bucket and ask them to empty the bath as quickly as possible. I see, says the politician. And if he's got any sense, he'll choose the bucket. No, says the director. If he's got any sense, he'll pull the plug out. Would you like a room with a view? A man from Los Angeles had recently taken a new job up in San Francisco, leaving his 70-year-old mother, widowed just 6 months prior, to fend for herself back home. As her birthday approached, guilt started to creep in. He wanted to send her something really special. At the office, he asked around for ideas. Most suggestions were typical: flowers, chocolates, maybe a spa voucher. But none of them felt quite right. Then one coworker perked up. Get her the birds, he said. Birds? Yeah, talking birds. I got them for my mom. They're incredible. They cost $500 each, but totally worth it. These birds can talk, do impressions, even dance and tell jokes. The man was intrigued. They just need a day or two to settle in before they start performing, the coworker added. Sold. He ordered them that afternoon and had them express shipped to his mother. The next morning, he called her, brimming with excitement. Happy birthday, Mom. Oh, thank you, sweetheart, she said warmly. Did my gift arrive? "Oh, yes," she replied, "and I enjoyed them very much." "Thank you, darling. They were delicious." There was a moment of stunned silence. "Wait, you ate them?" he gasped. "Mom, those birds were $1,000. They talked, they danced, they told jokes." There was another pause. Then his mom said, "Well then, why the hell didn't they say something?" A recently widowed woman walked into a pet store looking somber. "Hi," she said to the sales rep. "My husband passed away a few months ago, and the house just feels so empty. I need a companion, something to keep me company." The employee smiled kindly. "Have you considered a dog?" "Oh, no," she said, waving him off. "Too much mess, all the walking, all the cleaning up after them." "Well, what about a cat?" "Very low maintenance." She shook her head. "All that hair. And don't even get me started on litter boxes." The sales rep thought for a moment, then leaned in and said, "All right, I might have something a little unconventional. We just got in a chimpanzee. He's incredibly smart. He's trained to do household chores, run errands. He's basically a furry little butler." The widow raised an eyebrow. "A chimpanzee?" "Look," the rep said, "there's a grocery store right next door. Give him your shopping list and see for yourself." Skeptical but curious, the woman handed the chimpanzee her grocery list and followed him into the store. To her astonishment, he zoomed through the aisles and collected every item in minutes, faster than she ever could. She returned to the pet store, speechless. "He's amazing. I'll take him." That evening, the widow had a formal event and, so taken with her new companion, decided to bring the chimp along. He even rode the bus with her. But on the way home, tragedy struck. The bus got into a terrible accident and everyone aboard perished, except the chimpanzee. When the police arrived, they were stunned to find the chimp unharmed, and even more stunned by how well he could communicate. An officer sat across from him in the station. At the time of the accident, what was everyone doing? The chimp placed a hand on his stomach and started wiggling his hips. "Dancing?" asked the officer. The chimp nodded enthusiastically. "Okay, were they doing anything else?" The chimp mimed drinking from a bottle. "Drinking?" Again, a confident nod. The officer scribbled furiously, then looked up again. "And what were you doing while they were all dancing and drinking?" The chimp calmly raised both hands and pantomimed driving a bus. A man wakes up one morning and notices something unusual. He has an erection that just won't go away. Days pass and it's still there. Concerned, he digs through his closet and puts on the loosest pants he can find, then heads to the local drugstore. He walks up to the pharmacy counter and asks the lady there if he can speak with the male pharmacist. She replies, "I'm afraid there's no male pharmacist here, sir. But I'm a registered pharmacist, and so is my sister. We own the store. We're used to dealing with all sorts of personal problems, so don't worry." Desperate, the man glances around, then unzips his pants, pulls out his rather persistent issue, and says, "What can you give me for this?" The woman doesn't flinch and asks, "How long has this been going on?" "Almost 3 days now," he says, his face turning red. The pharmacist nods thoughtfully and then says, "I'll need to consult with my sister for a moment. Please wait here." She disappears behind the counter, returning shortly. The man, anxious, asks, "So, what's the verdict?" The pharmacist smiles and says, "Well, the best we can do right now is $5,000 and a half interest in the store." A husband and wife, along with their 10 kids, are waiting to board a crowded subway. When the train arrives, it's nearly full. The husband looks at his wife and says, "Honey, you and the kids should board now, and I'll catch the next one." She nods, and the train departs with her and all 10 children. As the husband waits for the next train, he notices an elderly man with a walker shuffling around. Every time the man moves, there's a loud, irritating screech from the bottom of the walker. The noise goes on, driving the husband crazy. Finally, he can't take it anymore and calls out, "Sir, could you please put some rubber tips on the ends of that walker? The noise is unbearable, and we're both trying to wait for the train in peace." The old man looks up at him, pauses for a moment, and says with a grin, "Well, if you had put a rubber on your end, we'd both be riding that train right now." An older gentleman arrived at the urologist's office for his scheduled appointment. The waiting room was filled with patients, each waiting their turn. As he approached the receptionist's desk, he was greeted by a large, imposing woman who looked like she could bench press a truck. He gave her his name, and in a voice that could be heard across the room, she replied, "Yes, I see your name here. You're here about impotence, right?" In an instant, all the eyes in the waiting room turned to the poor man, and he could feel the heat rising in his face. After a brief moment of embarrassment, he straightened up, and in an equally loud voice, he responded, "No, I'm actually here to inquire about a sex change operation. And I'd like the same doctor who did yours." An elderly lady had always dreamed of traveling abroad, but as she grew older, she realized time was running out. So she finally decided it was time to get a passport and see the world. She made her way to the passport office and approached the clerk. "How long will it take to get a passport?" she asked. The clerk, without missing a beat, replied, "First, you must take the loyalty oath. Please raise your right hand." The old lady complied, raising her hand shakily. The clerk began, "Do you swear to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, domestic and foreign?" The old lady's face turned pale. She looked at the clerk with wide eyes, her voice trembling as she asked, all by myself?" A woman decided to take her little boy to visit the gravestones of their deceased relatives at the cemetery. It was the boy's first time there, and he was full of questions. They made their way to the first gravestone where the woman's grandmother, Annie, was buried. Beneath her name were the initials RIP. The little boy looked up at his mother with curiosity and asked, "Mommy, what does RIP stand for?" His mother smiled gently and explained, "It stands for rest in peace. It means that we wish for Grandma Annie's spirit to find peace in the afterlife." The boy nodded, taking it in as they walked on. Soon they arrived at the gravestone of the woman's Uncle Joe. Once again, the little boy pointed to the initials underneath his name and asked, "Mommy, what does RIH stand for?" Without missing a beat, the mother looked down at her son and said, "Well, we really didn't like Uncle Joe." One afternoon, a weary older dog wandered into my yard, looking like he'd had quite the long day. He wore a collar, and his belly was round and well fed, so it was obvious he had a family and was taken care of. As he trotted up to me, I knelt down and gave him a few gentle pats on the head. Without hesitation, he followed me inside, wandered down the hallway, and curled up in the corner. Within moments, he was fast asleep. An hour later, he stretched, got up, and made his way to the door. I let him out, watching him trot off back down the street. The next day, the same routine occurred. He showed up in my yard, greeted me with a wag of his tail, walked calmly inside, and made a beeline for his spot in the hallway. He settled in for another long nap, and the cycle continued, day after day, for weeks. Intrigued, I decided to leave a note pinned to his collar. "I'd love to know who owns this sweet dog. I've noticed that almost every afternoon he comes to my house for a nap. Is this something you're aware of?" The next day, the dog returned with a new note attached to his collar. "He lives with 6 children, including 2 under 3. He's simply trying to catch up on his sleep. Could I possibly join him tomorrow?" A man walked into a therapist's office, his shoulders slumped and a heavy frown on his face. He took a seat and sighed deeply before speaking. "Doc, you've got to help me. I can't go on like this." The therapist looked up from his notes, concern in his eyes. "What's the problem?" The man's voice was tinged with frustration. "Well, I'm 35 years old, and I still can't catch a break with the ladies. No matter how hard I try, I just seem to scare them away." The therapist nodded thoughtfully. "My friend, this is not as serious as you think. What you need is a boost in self-esteem. Here's what I want you to do. Each morning, I want you to get up, rush to the bathroom mirror, and look yourself in the eye. Tell yourself that you are a good person, a fun person, and an attractive person. But say it with real conviction. Speak it like you truly believe it. If you do this every day within a week, I promise you'll have women buzzing all around you." The man, feeling hopeful for the first time in a while, nodded eagerly. "Thanks, Doc. I'll try it." A week passed, then 2 and 3. Finally, the man walked back into the therapist's office, but this time his expression was anything but joyful. He sat down heavily, looking just as downcast as before. The therapist raised an eyebrow. "Didn't my advice work?" The man sighed with a mix of exasperation and relief. "Oh, it worked all right. For the past few weeks, I've had some of the best moments of my life with the most beautiful women." The therapist smiled, pleased with the results. "That's great. So what's the problem?" The man leaned forward, his voice low and defeated. I don't have a problem, but my wife does.